building as their branding and advertising tool for the 80s and 90s. So during 60 Minutes, Sunday Night Football, they had Wassa insurance commercials. The girl that would win the spelling bee because she could spell Wassa because the USA was in the middle. The old funny westerns. But at the end of every one of those commercials, there was a can of this building, and they used that as a way to feel local to a lot of communities, even though they were publicly traded companies. After that, they wanted to move it to the west side of town because that's where our campus was, which Aspirus is in now. And they found out it was too expensive and the logistics were difficult to move a historic building. So they actually built a full-scale replica of this with conference rooms in the basement. So I think the basement is actually bigger than the train station itself. So it was really cool to get to go see that halfway through demo because, you know, there's ups and downs when you start a new business. My wife and I are the owners. And it was really cool to, like, halfway through just to see what the final product was going to be. It's like, all right, just keep pushing, this is going to be cool. After that, a lady, Marianne Norton, I believe, this was scheduled to be decommissioned and torn down again, raised a bunch of money to have it saved and restored, and it was donated to the Boy Scouts, where it served as their headquarters for probably a decade or so until they built their campus out on Camp Phillips, which is a really nice facility if you guys haven't been there yet. After that, it was Head Start, and then it was an electronic repair and recycling business. And by recycling, they meant leave all their crap for me to throw away. So this is filled with computers and microwaves, freezers, keyboards, so many keyboards. I don't know why anybody needs that many keyboards. I couldn't give it away. And this had been actually abandoned for about 5 years when we took it over. We added 60 square feet to it by removing all of the layers because they didn't demo. They just kept going layer over layer. So when I broke into the first layer to see the brick, I got through the drywall, there was more drywall. Underneath that was cement board, and underneath that was plaster. And all that plaster had to be hand chiseled off of all of the brick you see in the entire building. There was 3 levels of ceilings in these other 2 rooms, 1 plaster, 1 wood, then 1 regular drop. So we filled up over 60 40-yard dumpsters and saved $70,000. Being younger as an entrepreneur gives you less resources, as the Mays like to call it, which is a fancy word for money. So we were able to work with a lot of people in the community, some friends and some soon-to-be friends with a lot of different things. The front door, there's a gentleman that found me at the Great Dane and said, I want to make you a door. And I said, okay. And he actually had a reserve stock of 100-year-old oak that had been reclaimed from the bottom of Lake Superior. And he'd been waiting for the perfect project and reached out to me. He's a home brewer, so I kind of gave him some tips and pointers on brewing because my background is in brewing. I was engineering in college, and then my last 10 years been as the brewmaster for the Great Dane, and now I kind of do some consulting for them still. So I traded him some homebrew knowledge, some whiskey, and some cash, and he actually built the door for us. The cedar wood that you see there and behind the bar was hand cut or cut from a local farmer. So I loved it because, you know, it's great to work with these individuals, and, you know, cedar has that nice warm feeling. It always has that aroma. So that was a great opportunity. The bar was built from a friend of ours that used old hardwood flooring. So that way it still has that rustic feel to it, even though that it's new. All the chairs, and even the thrones, were I found those on Craigslist and Facebook for $10 or less in reupholstery. And pews came from an ad agency in Green Bay. So wherever we can be creative, wherever we can be resourceful, it all tells the story, which is good. So we'll head next door and we'll jump into the process a little bit. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them at the end. So yeah, we'll head next door. Yeah, he's in a similar situation, and so he always has me kind of help. He loves coming here, and we're working with his maple syrup to make a maple rum. So if there's anything you guys need to see, skinny sticks out of Marathon. We're going to be making a maple shine. So the room that you're in right now is our packaging room. It's really sophisticated. I put whiskey into a bottle and put it in the cardboard. We got plenty of tasty, so we're good there. So yeah, we can move on. built in 1923 and served as the Railway Express, which was kind of like the UPS of the day. So all your packages, all your mail, and what do you call it, your luggage. If you were on the train, would come through here. That's why we've got the double doors on each side. It was a big pain in the butt, but we actually were able to keep the doors. Anytime you're in food processing, wood is a bad thing. So it's one of those, like, but it's historically significant. And so they ended up being pretty cool about it. Let's see here. When we found this building, way worse shape than that building. It did have a bunch of more recycled material. But there was needles, there was graffiti, all the windows were broken, all the doors were broken. Everything was just a mess. And the funny thing is we got done with that building and it was like, oh yeah, so the distillery. So a lot of this and a lot of what was over there is friends, family, and a lot of people. So jumping into the process, the big green machine right here is my boiler. That's my heating source for my mash tun and my still. You don't want to use open flames in a distillery. You're going to have a bad time. A little flammable in here. That big tote there is basically 192 proof vodka. So you want to make sure that you take the proper precautions. This is a mash tun or grain cooker. It does just that. It cooks the grain. So I dump my corn, my wheat, my rye, my barley in here, and I start heating it up with water. And I add enzymes, and I bring it up to 189 degrees. And that's where we're at right now. The timing worked out really well, so it'll actually rest here for an hour. Because the enzymes that I've added are starting to break down those carbohydrate starch chains that are naturally in corn, wheat, and rye. So imagine that they're long chains. They break those chains into chunks. And then we'll let this sit for an hour and let those enzymes do their work. Bring it to a quick boil where we'll make sure that it's decontaminated with any foreign yeast strains or any bacteria that might have been on the crops. Bring it down to 150 degrees where I'll add my last enzyme that takes those little chunks and breaks them up into little pieces. So if you imagine kind of like if you have like broccoli, you chunk it out, and then if you want fine, you chop it a little more. And what that does is it breaks it into simple sugars. So when I start, this tastes like hay water, and when I'm done, it tastes like sweet cream corn, which is a physical indication of the process that's taking place. I'll drop it down to between 70 and 80 degrees, right around room temperature. I'll add my yeast. Much like us, we're very sensitive to hot water. So I like to think is yeast is like little people. And so they got to eat the sugars and all that, and they need to be in a hospital environment. I wouldn't like cooking in 120 degrees, so I know they don't want to cook in 120 degrees. So I pitch my yeast in, I put it into those two big tanks over there. Those are my fermenters, and they do just that. No person has ever made alcohol. Yeast makes alcohol. I'm basically a yeast farmer. So the yeast eats the sugars that we've created in the mashing process and converts it into CO2, alcohol, and there's other byproducts and flavors that you have different yeast strains that give different flavors. In brewing and wine, you drink or consume the product out of fermentation. So all of those flavors and nuances are noticeable and palatable right away. Where in distilling, that's only one step, and you don't actually consume that product. So it takes 2 to 10 days to ferment. In comparison, at a professional level, beer takes 2 to 6 weeks, wine takes 2 to 6 months, plus conditioning. And although be it the fastest fermenting, it's the least, the longest on return, because most of what we do as an artesian craft distillery is in barrel aging. So I have that, and it's anywhere from 8 to 12% alcohol. I've got the yeast, I've got the grain, all of that in there. In distilling, or in beer and wine, you separate the liquid before it goes in there. That's why they're clear and not chunky. In distilling, different story. We want all those flavors. So we'll pump that 10%-ish boozy mash or mess into the still here. We'll start heating it up. And at 172.8 degrees is the boiling point of alcohol. So much like water, at 212 will start steaming out or evaporating. The alcohol is less dense. So a gallon of water weighs 8.3 pounds. A gallon of booze is like 7.8.
So there's physical indications again of different densities. And because it's less dense, it evaporates out sooner. The steam carries up, collects in the helmet, and then it's kind of bottlenecked or restricted for an even flow of consistency over to the column. The measure of a good brewer, distiller, vintner is not making a good product once. It's being able to make that same product again and again and again. And having better equipment and a great process is the way to make sure that you have sustainability over multiple batches. So the steam will go through that column there. Each one of those windows has a plate. Each one of those plates have holes in it, and those levers open and control those, open and close those holes. So the more plates that I use, the more filtered, I guess would be kind of the way, or stripped it becomes. So if I'm making a vodka, I'll use all my plates and I'll run it through 6 times or more. For whiskeys, brandies, rums, what we do a lot of, we usually only use the top 2 plates. And that's because it leaves a lot of flavor and strips less out. So the more flavors I have on the front end, the more flavors we'll have on the back end years down the road after aging. The steam will carry up through those plates. The big top minion looking guy there is the deflegmator. That's the brains of the operation. It tells the still to heat up, cool down, or maintain. Once it says that that's all right, it kicks it over to the condenser, and the steam goes through these coils where I have cold water running over it, condenses it back into a liquid, and comes out with that glass globe on the very end there. The first 10% we collect is your methanols, or it's called your heads, and there's a lot of methanol in there. That's the stuff that'll make you go blind. Don't drink that. We're actually partnering with a local racetrack to sponsor a night. So all the dirt track cars will use our heads as their fuel. Otherwise, we can sell it to breweries as cleaning chemicals. So it's kind of nice that everything that we do in the distilling process is reusable. From when we're done distilling all the alcohol out, I'll give that grain back to the farmers. The byproducts of the still I can use for cleaning agents, resell, or use it for fuel. So the only thing we waste is a little bit of water for condensing. There are other distilleries that can actually capture that water, reuse it. I reuse a lot of it for cleaning. However, as you can see, I completely run out of room in the first 3 months, and we have a shipping container outside where I do all of my barrel storage, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So there's a lot more things that we're going to be able to do. I just need to find a little bit more room. So more fun things to come. So that first 10% we collected is our heads. The middle 80% we collect in those big silver containers are our hearts. And that's 110 to 140 proof depending on what we distilled. If we're making a vodka, we toss it in, run it through a bunch more times. But for most of our spirits, it'll go from there right into your barrel. And then the last 10% is your tails. And we kind of let that peter out. It's a lot of fusel alcohols, a lot of oils, things you don't want, kind of cloudy. So we can either capture that, chill it, filter it, and toss it in for more efficiency, or you just kind of turn off the still and kind of peters out. So in the barrel aging, which we do a lot of, it goes into charred oak barrels that are North American white oak. They're one of the only trees that is dense enough that it holds liquid in, but it still allows it to breathe. So when I say we age it outside, that's intentional, not just because I'm out of space, but because you want the elements and the humidity to interact with it. So in the summer, it's hot and humid, it swells up. In the winter, it gets cold and dry and it pushes it out. And so as it ages and works with the different season, it soaks it in and pushes it out. It soaks it in and pushes it out. Kind of like brings in a tree. And so it's the barrel that gives it all of its color, aroma, and a lot of the flavor because they char the inside of it. So not only does it have a little bit of that char taste, it's also caramelizing sugars that are naturally in the wood itself. And so depending on how dark you char it will depend on how dark and how sweet or how burnt your flavor turns out on the back end. If I want to make a whiskey, I use raw grains, corn, wheat, rye, or barley, and distill it. And what I get is moonshine. I put the moonshine into a barrel and it becomes whiskey. If I want to make a brandy, I'll start with wine, grapes, apples, whatever it is that we're going to be doing. I'll distill that and I'll get something called grappa, which is kind of like moonshine of fruit. Once I put it into a barrel, it becomes brandy. Same thing with rum. In order to call it rum, it has to be sugarcane or a sugarcane byproduct such as molasses. And same thing when I get it out, it's kind of a cachaça, which is a very like sharp, almost tequila-esque product, which most people don't think that rum doesn't have any aging because it's clear. They just use really old bottles and strip the color out, but it is still barrel aged for usually a year to 3 years. Let's see what else. I'd just like to thank all of you guys for coming out on a Sunday. There's not a lot of businesses that get the opportunity to interact one-on-one with people, and it's really great to see that you guys come out and support us. We do our best to support the local community as well. Born and raised here, went away to college, came back, got married, the whole 9 yards. We knew long ago with my 10 years at Brewmaster and my wife as the general manager at Target that we wanted to do something for ourselves. And we saw that the brewing industry was oversaturated and did some market research to see that people were going out, they're spending the same amount of money, but they were drinking less. So that means they're drinking a higher end product or a more premium product. And so we put a lot of emphasis into that with the tasting room over there because that's the financial engine that drives this whole project. We have a 3.5-year age bourbon, we have a 2.5-year age rye that we made at another distillery when we first came up with this idea after a few drinks at volleyball. But, so we have limited inventory. So the business of being in that, not being able to see a return for 2 to 3 years, we knew we needed to bring in income. And that's why we specialize in craft cocktails, and that's why we do something different. So they do take a little bit longer to make, but we fresh squeeze all of our own juices. We hand make all of our own simple syrups. We shake, double shake, dry shake, stir, and layer drinks for a reason. We went out to New York to work with some of the most famous cocktail lounges around to make sure that we were doing it the way that it needs to be done. And we're really excited that people have been really receptive to what we're doing, and we're expanding. We're going to be having brunch. We've got live music on Thursdays. We're looking at doing some like panini Saturdays, so some fun lunch options. But all the products that we do, we try and source locally. So our honey and honeycombs come from Went Farms. We use Naviv Fromage cheese because she works with a lot of great local suppliers. We're partnered with the Grand Theater, Condor Coffee, and so many more to come. My thing is if we're adding something new, don't buy it from Cisco. Find somebody in town that does it. And then I don't need a chef. I can use other people's, their experience and advertise and partner with them, and they'll do the same with us. And I think that's how you support a community and you support each other. And hopefully it works. We'll find out. We've only been open 3 months, but things have been going really well, and I guess we can get to sampling. I'm going to bring out 4 products. One being vodka, 100% corn-based, very, very similar to a Tito's. Our gin, which is a London Dry botanical interpretation. So it's very earthy, not so much as piney. There are pine notes, but it's not to that same degree. Gin is the only product that we can't sell because the government doesn't want to be open. So they approve all of our recipes, all of our labels, so I can't make any new product, I can't do anything. There's breweries and distilleries that can't start. It's affecting our industry very hard. Yeah, and it's one of those, it's an unintended byproduct where people are like, oh yeah, I guess you do need the government for that. So we'll have more products. Everything is going to be delayed in our industry for a few months, and you can be upset about it or you can move on. I'm one that I don't worry about gas prices. Oh, it's $1.97. Cool, I'm still filling up my tank. If it was $3 or $4, there's things out of my control that I just try not to get upset about. The rye whiskey that we talked about is aged 2.5 years. 95% rye, 5% corn. It's very spicy. Has a lot of those cinnamon or almost allspice notes. And the bourbon is aged 3.5 years. And being in the barrel longer and being sweeter, it'll have a little bit higher, more body. It'll be a little sweeter. And you'll definitely get a lot more of those subtle barrel notes. So I'll come along with little sample glasses. Hold on to them, and I'll just kind of keep refilling you. If you guys have any questions, let me know.
The yeast that you use, is that different than a beer brew yeast?
It is, and I actually have my own proprietary yeast strain that can homogenize 5 different bacteria into it. So it's one of the advantages coming from the brewing background. And we took classes on entrepreneurship, and we hired a world-renowned consultant
through the brewing industry. So it's been really fun to work
Is that a
with
nervous
them, where
laugh or is that a
there's things that these world famous
That's why hair
distilleries are
dryers the
doing
keys.
that is very difficult for people that are just getting into the industry. So 5-6 years in and they're starting some of these practices, we're already implementing our own practices in our own way. Because as a brewer, mashing and fermentation is what we do. Distilling is where we need the help. So, but you can use any yeast you want. You know, there's no reason that you can't use wine yeast with corn. It needs to be aged a minimum of 2 years in a brand new charred oak barrel, and at least 51% corn. So I use my bourbon barrels, then become my rye become my brandy becomes my rum, because you're going to filter out all of those characteristics out of the rum anyways, and at that point my barrels will be so used after 12 years that they won't be good for anything else but furniture. I do not sell brandy because it's still a few years out. I made my first brandy with a little old winemaker, and this, the lid, they like to seal up with that alcohol.
It looks like it needs some muscles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're moving it a little bit. So we can move it a little bit.
If you want to give it a shot. He gets it, I loosened it for him. Ah, yes.
If you wait till your birthday, you're pregnant.
So this is the precursor.
But
This is the grappa to what will be our brandy that is aging in barrels. And so we worked with a little old winemaker who had 400 gallons of wine from local grapes that was a little bit too acidic to actually have for wine. And makes excellent brandy. So this will be.
All right, invite
this
him
is grappa. Alright, so some mellower stuff. We got the vodka here. Again, 100% corn based. Sunday fun. We're gonna do brunch, and I think we're gonna do no judgment hour. So from like 9 to or 10 to noon, it'll be like happy hour. But no judgments on Sundays.
and no foods as of right now.
We have flatbreads and we have charcuterie, so pizzas and meat and cheese boards. And then we're going to be rolling out with dessert the next week or so with our after dinner coffee drinks that we're working
Yeah,
on.
because you guys didn't have any food when we first opened. Because
Nope.
I remember the food truck was out front when we came.
Yep, and we'll still do food trucks and things like that. My big thing is implementation and consistency. So that way, you know, we one step at a time. Our big thing is craft cocktails. That's our identity. We want to make sure we executed that before we moved on to food. Then we added the meat and cheese board, which is really easy because you don't need a heating source. That went well. Then we added the flatbreads, and then the holidays hit, so we pumped the brakes on everything because we knew that we were going to have a large influx in traffic, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had a great experience. So there might be there might be a cocktail you like better, there might be a whiskey you like better, but we hope that there's no better experience that you find. And you know, we hope that it starts with the nostalgia of the building, the warm, friendly staff, and then finish with a great handcrafted cocktail that you can't get anywhere else. So it's just the little things, and you know, we're growing slowly, doing one thing right, moving on, doing one thing right, moving on, and trying to figure out ourselves, but we're never really going to be a restaurant. You know, we really want to kind of stay focused on the spirits, our industry, and then just have some little amenities. But if anybody has any businesses or partnerships or ideas, we're always open. The next crop coming around is our gin. It is a London dry, like I said, interpretation. it's in our Bee's Knees, our Pink Lady. It's going to be on the Clover Club, which is a raspberry drink we have coming. We have a beet shrub cocktail coming.
Okay, we'll let me know what it is.
Yeah, right. That one is going to be. I need to make more gin.
Sugar, all, yeah.
Raspberry note.
Before I go to Target, you know.
Yeah. Hey, Target Handbook says you can have a drink before you get there.
Oh, it does? Oh,
Yeah, I think you can have two
Well,
drinks.
the last time I came for the tour, I couldn't drink because I had to go right to Target. So I
Well,
told Kim I'd come today because last night I worked with her.
She's working today.
I know she is because I worked last night with her. She's closing, so she told me to come today then. So I could drink.
Nope, sorry.
Is gin not barrel aged?
Gin is not barrel aged. Gin is a botanical vodka. I use juniper, coriander, lemon peel, grapefruit peel, almonds, licorice, peppercorn, angelica root. There's a couple other that we do.
How long does that have to steep in the vodka?
We don't steep. That's kind of the bathtub way of doing it,
Okay.
the old school. I can send vodka through my gin basket, which is that little canister in between the two copper
Okay.
pieces. But how I actually do it is through a oil distillation kit. So I take all those botanicals, I take the oils off of it, and I dose it to the vodka.
Okay.
So that way I can have a more consistent product because, much like you go to the grocery store and apples change from season to season, crop to crop, same thing happens with all of these things. So there might be a time where I have more or less juniper, more or less grapefruit, I can actually then isolate those specific flavors and then add them accordingly. All it is it's just the oils that have been taken out of those ingredients and added, and so there's multiple ways to do that. That's exactly what it is.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I've got a really nice essential oil still here, and I've got more fun ideas. Apparently, I'm not allowed to talk about them because my wife gets mad at me. Apparently, half my ideas are hers or something. The gin is the only one I can't sell. So the vodka is 20, 22, the rye is 40, the bourbon is 42. The most expensive ingredients are taxes and time. So anytime you see each spirit, that's why it costs more. So I get taxed to produce it, I get taxed to store it, I get taxed to sell it, and if I somehow make money, I get taxed again. So yeah, right. There's not a lot of people that get to go to work every day. What are you doing today? I'm making whiskey. So this is our rye, a little spicier.
Between rye and whiskey, just the grains that you start with?
Rye whiskey, whiskey is any product distilled from grain. So you can have corn whiskeys, you can have rye whiskeys, bourbon is a whiskey. So it's pretty much anything. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I hear that, I just really want to a whole ounce. Watch you get crazy.
What is this, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So our tour is a little bit more in depth with the science of things and how the conversions happen. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Reach out on our Facebook. I'd be happy to re-inform you and things like that. Kind of like to do for the brewery and the distillery. I like to do beer distilling school, and so it's a great way to kind of educate people on how the process works, or new employees especially. This is the bourbon, by far the most popular product. We have limited inventory of it, so hopefully it makes the next 2 years. I ordered about 10,000 bottles, or I had 10,000 bottles made, or worth made. I get it in barrels and then package it myself. It's our recipe, just made somewhere else. I've done that in the brewing industry. where I made beer for companies much larger so they could do market research without making 1,000 barrels. And I've done it for breweries much smaller that needed inventory. So I thought, why not do that, you know, in a different area? And then if you guys are interested in purchasing any product, you can talk to the bartender. Normally my wife's here with a little handheld. I'm not good at technology. I'm really good at chemistry, but not gonna deal with those. So, no, thank you guys so much for coming. It really means a lot for us as, you know, just people that want to come and know more and see more. From a business standpoint, you know, you can throw a ton of money in advertising and marketing. You don't really know the consumer. So I know that it's invaluable to have a half hour of your time. So I can't take you guys enough. That's why we do the little tasting and stuff for free. It's just making sure that people know a little bit more. Because the number one question I still get is like, oh, you're a distillery. What kind of beer do you make? So, you know, it's a little different. It's a little different, similar but different. And then again, some things we're going to be looking at too, expanding the menu, more food options, and hopefully within the next year will be a winery. So if I need to ferment all that wine, why not just sell the wine too? So, you know, we'll specialize in traditional wines. So your Cabernets, your Pinot Grigios, Pinot Noirs, kind of staying away from the fruity stuff. Not that it's not good stuff, it's just not my favorite. And so the my old brewer, the brewer that trained me how to do everything, because I did a 2-year unpaid apprenticeship out of college. Parents were real thrilled with that. His motto was, make something that you like, and make something that you'll drink, because at least somebody will. And you know, I like to take that to heart. It's like, you know, do something that you want to do, and you'll be more passionate about it, and you'll make sure it's done right. You know, it's not like, you know, brewing and cooking is very similar, or distilling even, and it's, you know, do you want to flip burgers, or do you want to do something more fun? And this allows us to have all the fun that we really like to do. So yeah, thank you guys again. You're more welcome to go get another cocktail. We'll have football on. And like I said, if you guys are looking for a little nibble, we got flatbreads and charcuterie stuff. And then I'll be around for more questions. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Yeah, not a problem.
If you like this video, go ahead and like it or make a comment. And check out all kinds of other videos that we have. Kathy, where else can they find us?
Find us on Facebook and Instagram.
Hot dog.